Morning, afternoon, good evening, good night, everybody. Welcome to Snap Take. Today, I got something special for you. At Snap Judgments, I'm Glazer. I help host that podcast. We help Vin Kelsier make the tier list over on Snap.fan. Well, what you're seeing on the screen is that tier list. We do a whole podcast breaking down and explaining every single episode. Unfortunately, one of our other co-hosts is having some pretty severe technical difficulties. We'll get that episode up for you soon. So what I'm going to do, since that's not up, is I'm going to take you through this tier list. We're going to look through all these decks. We've got the A-range decks, which is the Darkhawk stature, the general Darkhawk decks that make up the standard A, and then the 5 A- decks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A- decks. Cool? 6 A- decks. We're going to take a look at my favorite version of all of those. You want to hit infinite? This is the video for you. This is all of the best decks, my personal favorite version, and I'm even going to give you substitutions. I do content like this all the time. I need you to hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, so you know you get a new Snap Take video every single weekday. Cool? Cool. All right, now that you've done that, let's take a look at the A-range deck, the Darkhawk stature deck. This is my favorite version, the version I hit infinite with. I've done a whole video on it. The link's going to be right down in the description, so make sure you check that out. I'm not going to talk about this too much. Instead, I'm going to focus on a common question all of us content creators are getting right now. What substitutions? All right. The cards you have to have that are higher than pool 3 are you have to have stature and you have to have Darkhawk. You don't need Ghost. And you don't need Jeff. Excuse me, you also have to have Zabu. This whole thing falls apart with Zabu. Zabu is like old new when Zabu was new, Zabu is your win condition. He's your immediate condition. But you still should really have Darkhawk and really have stature. However, I want it noted that someone hit infinite with this deck and they had everything but Darkhawk. They didn't have Ghost. I think they had Nebula in that spot. But in that Darkhawk spot, they were running Crossbones. So you can do this even without Darkhawk. That's completely crazy. That's how strong the tempo of this deck is. Jeff can be one of two cards. Jeff can be right now Nightcrawler or Cloak. The reason you want Jeff to be Nightcrawler or Cloak, if it's not just Jeff, is you want the move for Spidey. So far, so good? Good. I'm glad. That move on 5, ideally making Spidey cost 1, on 6 lets you go 4-drop, 1 cost stature if you played Back Bolt, and 1 stop Spider-Man. It's a great rate. You're dropping 12 plus ideally Darkhawk. So like 18 power. 22 power on the last turn with a lot of strong tempo leading into it. You don't have to take the turn off right before like you would with something like Death or Doomwave. Okay. Ghost is my personal tech pick. Thanks, Bootman, for the really great idea. Ghost is usually Nebula. If you don't have Nebula, please feel free to run Nightcrawler. If I didn't have Nebula, Ghost, or Jeff, I'd be running Nightcrawler and Cloak in this deck. Iceman's not the worst shot in the world either. Cool. That's how you get this deck going for you. All right, the A-tier decks. So I'm going to scroll down here, and you're going to see right here, there's a whole explanation about why Darkhawk is A. So we looked at a lot of data for this. Vin has all the background data for Snap.fan, right? He's the man there. So he has all this background data for Snap.fan. And what we looked at was every Darkhawk deck is just overperforming like crazy. If you put Darkhawk in a deck and that shell makes sense, that deck is an A-level deck. So I highlight in the podcast, which you'll get to, 6 different Darkhawk decks. Here's my favorite version of each of those. First and foremost, this is the Lambie. This is an extremely high-cost deck. It's not only got Thanos in it, it's got Darkhawk, Jeff, Zabu, and Iron Lad. Iron Lad could pretty easily be Rock Slide here, so don't feel too stressed about that. If you don't have Iron Lad, don't over worry about it. Iron Lad is important to the deck, but not pivotal. Iron Lad's hitting a Professor X, a Spider-Man, a Devil Dino, a Darkhawk is just absolutely stellar. Darkhawk is not always to play in this deck. He's here to be hit by Iron Lad, and he's mostly otherwise only being played if 1, you have nothing better on 4, or 2, you've got the Zabu Rock Slide thing set up so that you can make him bigger. If he's going to be small, if he's a 4/6, not really worth the stats, right? Everything not really worth the 4. Basically, as long as you can do another way, that's great. If you don't see Rock Slide and you Iron Lad into Darkhawk, that's a 412 right off the bat. Seems pretty good. Beyond that, the deck is fairly straightforward. It's running a land lockdown along with some combos. Iron Man is really big in the meta. If you're top rank right now with Iron Lad everywhere, you're going to see a lot of Iron Man. You're going to see a lot of Double Down. You're going to see a lot of Zabu. You're going to see a lot of Darkhawk. You're going to see a lot of Sarah. And Super Skrull is great for all of those, so he makes the deck. On turn 4, if you can Professor X location, Professor X location. If not, turn 5, Spider-Man or Professor X to try and lock something down, and then go ham to win one of the other 2. This is Lambie's deck. If you don't know, Lambie is Wesley Seek over on Twitter and on Twitch. Lambie is the best Thanos player in the world, bar none. This wasn't the deck I was going to showcase. This deck didn't exist when we first made this tier list. But hey, man, if Lambie suggests a Thanos deck, you know you're getting something that can get you to infinite. What do you do here if you don't have any card but Iron Lad? You'll be fine if you don't have if you don't have anything except Jeff. Although the Professor X does get significantly worse, you can always play something like Claw, and then you'd end up cutting something more high cost. Like, I'm assuming at that point you don't have Iron Lad, so you're running like an extra cheap card, a Daredevil, for example. And then that Claw is how you try and win that Professor X lane if you mess up with your gamble. There's also a reasonable option of Daredevil for something. Shang is the one tech card that's a little complicated. A lot of people running Enchantress over Shang right now. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. But you'd also rather not be put in a position to have to Enchantress your Devil, Dino, Super Skrull, Darkhawk, or Zabu. That's just too many ongoings along with Thanos' stones. Okay. The next deck is, we actually have 2 TLSGs. I believe TLSG gets his decks from various places. We've got this cool TLSG Bounce Darkhawk deck. The idea of this is that toward the end of the game, if you don't see Sarah, you've got your Darkhawk package to try and win the game. You can also bounce some things up in the early turns around turn 4 and have a really big hit monkey to end the game. It's a nice, simple combo, powerful combo. Iceman and Korg are ridiculously good to bounce. They really screw your opponent's hand and deck up. Very strong. Sunspot, just you're not always playing exactly on curve, is nice. This deck was made pre-Nebula. If you have Nebula, make that Sunspot Nebula. It's a really safe replacement. That's generally what this deck looks like and how this deck works. One other shout you could potentially do, Sunspot could be Bast. Bast makes a lot of sense here because the only thing you're downgrading is Rock Slide, and I guess Sarah, but who cares? Everything else gets bigger, and a few things get bigger in really relevant ways. Those things being Hitmonkey, Mysterio, and Bishop. And Darkhawk himself, right? Darkhawk then goes to a 4-9 with no extra help. Bishop immediately being a 3-3, and Mysterio being a 2-9 are all excellent, excellent plays. The other version of Sarah Hawk is the standard one. I like this one less. Straight up, I like this one less, but this is the one that people had Infinite with. This is the one that's really, really close to my first Infinite deck, where like there was no such thing as Darkhawk Rock Slide, so I had Enchantress and Crossbones in these spots, and like besides that, it was like almost exactly the same freaking deck. This one forgoes the Hitmonkey package because at the end of the game you want to be playing your tech cards. I strongly urge you to put Enchantress in this deck right now if you're playing it. Probably over Arrow. Arrow's no longer the buster card she was, although she is still good top end. The other thing you can do there, I've seen people do it off and on, is play Leader there. The rest of this deck is just playing good cards. It is saying, I've got Sarah, I've got really good tempo, powerful cards, and when I'm ready to take out your best cards, I can take out your best cards. This deck is sick. Its win rate remains great throughout. Let me actually take you down to that. If we hit this season, we can see even this season, this deck is winning almost 59% of its games with a 0.5 cube rate. Absolutely stellar. Actually, I'm sure you guys are curious. Let's take a look back. The Monkey Hawk deck this season, season 12. Little less right now, but it's not really being played. We are at it's Barely got any games. 55, 53% with a .44 cube rate. Still a really strong cube rate. Lampy's deck, again, just keeping you through this. We'll do it for the rest as we go. I just figured this is at least interesting. Lampy's deck is a silly, only 167 games, 52%, 0.23. Actually, that's not great. But you know what? Lampy's stats himself aren't on here, and those would naturally bring it up. This deck has existed for a day, and it's just gotten played a ton. My infinite deck is, it only exists this season. It is 60% win rate with 0.49 average cubes. Seems good. Okay. We're not done with Darkhawk yet. We've got two more Darkhawk decks to look at before we leave him behind. Next is the Big Hand Rocks. This is the version that is also running Iron Lad. Iron Lad could very easily be something like White Queen here without any real trouble. This deck fundamentally just says, I'm going to play big cards, and you're going to have to stop me. It's got a really cool cheeky Doom on top. It's got Sarah, who's insane to copy for Iron Lad. I played this deck a whole bunch yesterday, and it felt nearly unbeatable. Again, obviously you need Darkhawk. If you need to replace Iron Lad, White Queen is totally fine here, and there's nothing else that's above pool 3. So except Zebu. And again, anytime you're playing Darkhawk, you need Zebu. So this deck again has existed for a day. 51% win rate. My win rate with this is like 70% with a 0.05 R2. That's terrible. Whatever. Just trust me. Do me a favor. Forget the numbers for this one. These are my favorite decks for a reason. If you can play this deck, try this deck. You're going to win a lot of cubes. I am going to tell you, though, the one card I think I would strongly consider changing is Moon Girl. I don't love Moon Girl here. I like her. I understand her with Quinjet, but I don't feel like she's absolutely necessary. She's just a good card, not an incredible one. And I'm looking for broken, incredible things to do. Next up, we have Dara's Mold Lad. Iron Lad could easily be 1,000 different cards here. Iron Lad could be anything from Iceman to Nebula to anything else. This is the last Darkhawk deck. This is a deck that almost no one can play right now because Master Mold is so hard to get a hold of. But Master Mold basically says unless your opponent is playing discard, they're going to have 2 cards in hand. And that means that Ronin is a 5/7. And then if there's anything else good going on, they are just stuck 4 cards in hand. Cool. Extremely powerful. It's got the Sarah Doom combo that a lot of these decks have. It's a really, really powerful combo. It's got your Darkhawk Zebu combo. Again, Iron Lad is nice in this card. You do not, under any circumstances, need him. That can be any old cheap card. That could even be something like Maximus without any trouble. Your job is to basically get Master Mold out. If you play Maximus, get Master Mold and Maximus out after Ronin and enjoy your power spike. This deck's, again, brand new, so I don't have to even bother hitting season. It's only winning 51% of its games, but this archetype has been winning like 57% of its games since it existed. This is the one deck of the decks so far that we've talked about that I have not personally played and personally found incredibly powerful. The reason I haven't done that is I don't have Master Mold yet. But Dara is, we've all played Dara decks at this point. Dara is a card game genius. He makes incredible decks. This deck is incredible. Please try it out. All right, we're now on to the A- decks. We finished this. We've got the A- decks are Discard, Deathwave, Doomwave, Sarah Control, and Galactus. And I have a couple builds for you of each of those. So let's start with the Deathwave. Where'd I put the Discard? Whatever. Worst case, I'll go find Discard. Nebula Discard. Cool. We actually have Discard first. Awesome. All right, this is the Discard deck. It is nice and simple. It is basically win a lane with Storm. On Storm, you play Morbius, Nebula, or Dracula in order to get a lane. And then the other lane you want to win, you have MODOK Apocalypse Shenanigans, along with Colleen Swarm Shenanigans, so on. If you mess up anywhere, you've got Jeff. Colleen on turn 2 is either a 2 for 10 play or a 2 for 8 play. Like she is stellar as long as you have Swarm or Wolverine. Nebula is incredible in that Storm lane. Everything about this deck just works. It has been completely crazy, and unless the last day's stats have changed, again, this deck only exists this season due to Nebula. It is 57%, 0.42. I've played this. It's crazy good. It's crazy strong. I don't find discard super interesting. I know my co-host Chris Lavin thinks I'm blaspheming when I say that. He loves it. He says you should play it. Look, if you want a straightforward deck, it feels sort of like Galactus to me, where it's very linear and straightforward, but it wins. So play it. Next up, we have Deathwave. This is the one that won the last battle arena, so it is currently the king of the mountain. It is not the highest win rate. I'm going to go over the different things you could change in this deck very quickly. Oh, I'm sorry. It is worth noting that you must have Modok. Jeff is ultimately irrelevant. Like Nightcrawler here is fine. So are like 1,000 other little 2 and 3 cost cards. If you don't have Jeff, I'd probably just throw Collector in. He's not going to hurt. But everything else here is accessible except Modok. Nebula, you don't need Nebula. Nebula could be Sunspot. I think Nebula is better, but not enough better to not play it. And Modok is a must-have. No, Modok is the higher than Series 3 card you have to own. All right, this is 53% with a 4.56 win rate. The different versions are running either two. This is the spot people are messing with. These 2 cards, and then Enchantress's spot. The rest of the cards are fairly standard at this point. I'm going to make a suggestion. I think Enchantress is wrong. I think America is right. Because the most frustrating thing in the world when playing this deck is not seeing consistency. I've played it both with and without America, and everyone tells me I'm crazy, but you have a 6% chance more of seeing Wave by turn 5, which isn't amazing, 1 in 20 games, right? Of seeing Wave on turn 5 is nice, but not breaking. But like, you also have so much less of a chance of your early game being Death, She-Hulk, Doom, and then you being like, wow, or drawing all of your like destroyable cards and none of your destroy cards. The 6% chance of Wave by 6 is multiplied by your chances of not drawing an extra big thing early. You don't really want Enchantress on 4 very often. She's meant to be a turn 6 play. So all of that said, I think that's how I would change the deck. Some versions run a third one in Iceman. Some versions have this as Shang-Chi. I've even seen this as leader. I've seen Doom or Arrow become leader. All of that's totally fine. I think Arrow is actually important for a slightly different reason. If you don't see Wave on 5 and you want to stay in a game, having a decent-sized 5 to play is usually a good idea. You can get She-Hulk or Arrow down at that point while you could not get leader. So if I was going to run leader, it would have to be Doom. So I don't love that change. But I think Enchantress should be America despite this first place finish. I think this version is best as a meta read when you're going into a tournament, which is why its win rate is a little lower. So Enchantress becomes America, and then I think this deck is set. But remember, you can run Iceman, anything else. You'll also note that Deathwave is a straight-up pool 3 deck. If you are rank 60 and trying to get to rank 80, I think Deathwave is the ultimate deck to play. Next up, we have Doomwave. WW lows hit infinite in a day with this Doomwave. It is... Oh, crap. This is the Darkhawk one. Oh, well. We've got the Darkhawk Doomwave. I'll go through a non-Darkhawk one in a minute. This one also has Iron Lad. Iron Lad is important here, but not like terribly pivotal. Cool. Iron Lad could, as always, be lots of cards. Cam Best released a video yesterday that says Iron Lad is a force amplifier, and that's a really great way of looking at it. He's a way to take a good deck and just like push it up a level. He's not in and of himself a great deck. Nightcrawler could be 1,000 different cards here as well. Iceman, something like Daredevil, just fine. No stress. Polaris doesn't feel terribly necessary, but she's a great rate who helps mess up a nice Galactus. Everything else here is fairly obvious. Ideally, you wave on 5, and then you play nothing else. Then you play She-Hulk, and either Doom or Leader, and just win the game. If you're not seeing that, you've got your general Rockslide Darkhawk package. Iron Lad is completely freaking incredible with Leader or Doom. If you end up passing 5 with Iron Lad at hand, your She-Hulk is cheap enough to play with the Lad. I wouldn't even hate Titania for that kind of situation here. So you can go Lad, She-Hulk, Titania, something along those lines. Just fine. Jeff is good here. Again, great. Jeff is yet more of that just good cards package. These decks run a lot of good card packagey stuff. Cool. This is like the unattainable version of it. Again, Nightcrawler for me would be Iceman. And I don't think I would actually change anything else. I think the rest of the deck is basically all set. Cool. Win rate on this one, again, it's only existed for a day, 56%, 0.27 cubes. Deck is sweet. Try it out if you can. Next, we have Shahed's deck. Shahed made this. Shahed is a genius, one of the best deck builders in the game. Just a fantastic, phenomenal human being. You will also note that outside of Nebula, what we have here is another Pool 3 only deck. Cool? So by Nebula, you can play this. Is Nebula important to this? Absolutely. Without Nebula, Goose gets way worse. A lot of cards get way worse. What this wants to do is basically storm into a lane that has like Sunspot Nebula, use them to win a lane, use Goose to potentially win a lane. Then you play Doom and drop She-Hulk. It's got America for consistency. It's got Enchantress for giant annoying things. It's got Jessica in case you don't get the early play for Storm. And it wins. It is crazy strong. Friend of the show, Safety Blade, hit Infinite in a day with this. It was just insanely easy. This deck has won 58% of its games with a 0.5 cube rate, putting it right at the A range if this is the version we were talking about. This version was created as Nebula was created. I think it's probably an A range deck. It's the best deck, I think, in the game right now that doesn't have Darkhawk in it. With one exception, I think I might have found another A tier deck. KM Best has his own version of it, but I think I found another A tier deck. That's going to be tomorrow's video, though. You're going to have to wait another day for that. If I didn't say it in a little bit, you need to sub. You need to hit that notification bell. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. You're going to fall behind the meta. The whole benefit is following small creators like me is that when we innovate, it doesn't take over the whole meta, so you get this big competitive advantage. KM Best, TLSG, Spessy, they make a deck, and you're like, oh, I can go play their great deck. Great. But you know who else is playing that deck? Everybody. I innovate. J-Hugs innovates. I can list 50 different people. Hasa innovates, so on and so forth. You're not going to see it everywhere. You get that competitive advantage. That competitive advantage is a cube advantage. All right. Next deck is, I want to say, Serra Control. Our standard-ass Serra Control. This is the most basic Serra Control in the world. It's running a little Hitmonkey package, and it just says, I will go wide and end your stuff. I love this deck. I really, really, really want Zabu in it. I'd play Zabu over Scarlet Witch maybe. But this is, Cozy's version. But this deck wins 56% of the games this season, right? Like with a 0.59 cube rate. It's not like it's doing poorly even this season. Don't be afraid to play your Mysterio with your Hitmonkey on turn. Excuse me. Hitmonkey with Mysterio is a perfectly fine play on turn 4. That's still a 10 power turn 4. Turns out 4/10s are pretty good, right? Don't worry about that it's taking up extra space or locations, especially if you already have Bishop and Angela out. Because now your 4/10 play is giving 3 more power to Bishop, 4/13, and 2 more power to Angela, 4/15. Seems like that's pretty good. Everything else in this deck is fairly self-explanatory. This is the one deck that outside of maybe Zabu for Scarlet Witch, because I have really bad Scarlet Witch luck and she likes to beat the crap out of me, I don't think I would change anything. I think this deck is just really, really, really strong. I always want to change the Killmonger Nova combo, and every time I do, I regret it. There's just a lot of good ones in the game right now. It's also really, really, really nice to leave a Nebula alone for half the game, ignore it, letting them think they're going to win it, especially if they armor it, and then you can use Enchantress and Killmonger toward the end of the game to just end that nonsense and steal several lanes. It's a really strong deck. It racks up cubes. Your opponent doesn't know which of the control and counter cards you have, but you do, so you get to take advantage of it. This is, again, I said earlier, a version of this was the first deck I had Infinite with. I love it so very much. Next up, we have Galactus. We have, 3 different versions of Galactus. Galactus has generally not had the win rate to be an A deck. However, its play rate is somewhere between 1 in every 5 and 1 in every 10 games. It is so overwhelmingly, it's like double the next most played deck, Galactus. So because of that play rate, we made the decision that it should be an A-. I think that's totally reasonable. I also think the win rate is coming up with some of these decks. This is the Iron Lad Galactus. Shahed made it yesterday. It is brand freaking new, and it's winning 54% of its games with 0.44 cubes. This is an unrefined list, but Shayad is, as has been said, a genius. I literally name my Shayad decks in client. Shayad is a genius. It's how I name them every single time. Um, it basically is standard death, right? Galactus. It's got America for consistency. Last turn of the game with America in hand, assuming you've seen Iron Lad, not Galactus, you've got a 50-50 shot of hitting that Galactus. On turn 5, which is when you want to do it, not turn 6, you got a 50-50 shot of Iron Lad copying your Galactus. Seems pretty good, right? The one change I'd make to this deck is as good as Killmonger is. We're not living in a debris meta right this minute. I'd probably run Spider-Man for the free wave Galactus Spider-Man cubes. I don't think Galactus really wants to toss away free cubes. Everything else about this deck is brilliant. Other small potential changes are Wolverine and Yondu are excellent cards. Other cards that often fit in these spots are stuff like Daredevil, or you can just go all 3s and 4s to avoid Polaris, because Polaris is in every deck right now. It's also Cloak, who's a reasonable shout as well. All right. Next up, we have the generic Galactus without the lad. This is like the bog standard Galactus. We just need to hit this season to see its stats. Oh, excuse me. It's not going to give me this season. There it is. All right. Yes, it is. Okay. 54% with a nice 0.42 cube rate, really high cube rate. Now, again, not the highest win rate. Good, nice cube rate. Abundantly played. This is your bog standard Galactus. This is what you play if you just have Galactus and Null. You should not be playing these decks, I don't believe, without Galactus, and, well, obviously without Galactus, but without Null. And you just, do it without the lad. You hope you draw Galactus. It's otherwise basically the same deck, right? It's not running Killmonger. Cool. Killmonger also gives you an out if Yondu pulls for that Polaris pull of Yondu, if it goes in a place you don't like it. But everything else about this is relatively straightforward, right? Like it is trying to Galactus and win the game. All right, last Galactus deck. This is the one that our boy Revis has been all over the place promoting. Came in 4th in a tournament. Galactus is not supposed to work in tournaments, but it does. This is the deck. I think this is the best version of Galactus. I think there's an Iron Lad version of this, but no one has come up with it yet. The only one I could find had 4 games. This one is winning 50% of its games with a 0.3 cube rate. I believe that's all this season. Yeah, that's all this season. It's better than its numbers, right? Like I've seen this deck played. I've lost to this deck. It's better than its numbers. You just have to play it really, really smart. You do not. The way people play it wrong, I think, is most clearly you do not have to Galactus anymore. You win an awful lot of games by Electro into Shuri, into Destroyer, into Taskmaster Death. And I just want you to think about that combo for a second. You can also Shuri into Nimrod into Destroyer. It's very hard to protect against both that and the Galactus play. You're going to win an awful, awful, awful lot of games this way. It's super duper strong. Cool. That is the end of this list. Thanks for supporting our show. Make sure you check out the tier list on Snap.fan. Keep an eye out for the Snap Judges podcast. Like and sub. We'll see you tomorrow for another Snap Take, when I'm going to reveal what I think the best Iron Lad deck is now that I've had time to test it. See you tomorrow.